All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. A good chodesh to everyone. Baruch Hashem, we have a number of Daf Yomi sponsors. So to thank our sponsors, to thank our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Sammy and Malka Esterson, in memory of their parents, and commemoration of the yarzheit, Yitzchok Leib, Ben Aaron, HaKohen, Ludwig Stiefel, Sarah Rachel Bas Avram, Sarah Stiefel, Hinda Bas Henach Ephraim, Hinda Esterson. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the nishamas will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. We thank our week of learning sponsors, Jack Bennett, in memory of Givati Brigade Lieutenant Assaf Rosenfeld. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Baruch Hashem, a number of them, Mrs. Rosalie Sklar and family, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of her husband, Dr. Manfred Sklar, Mנחem Mendel, Bennett, Tzvi, Hirsch. Yankee and Avi Statman, Lezecher nishmas, Yankee's grandfather, Alter Chaim ben Yitzchok Isaac, on the occasion of his 7th yahrzeit, and in honor of Avi Statman's hanachas tefillin. Mazel tov, Mazel tov. Mנחem and Susie Schoenfeld for dedicating the shir today in this chus of a refuah shlema for Michael ben Ruti. And Dr. and Mrs. Gavant for dedicating the shir today, on a lighter note, in honor of Max Fried, the winning pitcher for the 2021 World Series champions. Good, don't do that again. And your Atlanta Braves. Good, and we should be zochem, Hashem, all of us, to use our time wisely. Okay, so we'll say with that, let's go back. So we'll say, so today's daf is Daf Chav Zayin 27, and we are picking up Emirz Hashem ad on Chav Vavam Beis at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says as follows: Shofar Shel Rosh Hashanah. So we'll say, so remember again now, we're into the halachas of shofar. In halachas of shofar. So what is chus, by the way? You know, in the Sfarim bring down that Chanukah is really the Chasimas Hadin, right? That really the Sifrei Chaim is really open until Chanukah. So how beautiful it is on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, from Mamish learning about the halachas of shofar. Really incredible. So it says in the Mishnah, Shofar Shel Rosh Hashanah Shayal Pashut. So the shofar used on Rosh Hashanah ultimately again is that of a Ya'al Pashut. Right now we're going to use the definition of a wild goat. Upiv Mitzuva Zav, and the mouthpiece, we'll see exactly what this means, but for now it means the mouth of the shofar is coated in gold. Ushtei Chatzotzros min Hatzdodin, and ultimately there are 2 trumpets on either side of the shofar. Shofar Ma'arich, the Chatzotzros Mekatzros. The shofar, so we'll say, so the imagery that they're painting is in the Beis HaMikdash. The imagery is that they're blowing the shofar together with the trumpets, but for Rosh Hashanah, they blow everything together, but the shofar extends past the blowing of the trumpet. So they're blowing everything, but they blow the shofar for longer than they blow the chatzotzros. So the Gemara says, Shemitzvah hayom b'shofar. Why? Because the mitzvah of the day is with the shofar. On fast days, they would blow a shofar, and they would use, again, the horn of a ram that was bent. Upi and mitzvah kesef. The mouthpiece would be coated with silver. Ushtei chatzotzros be'emtza. So we'll say this is very interesting. So just to understand, on Rosh Hashanah, right, you are using a straight shofar. Well, I will call it a shofar of a wild goat. You have the shofar in the middle, the chatzotzros on the side. Mouthpiece of the shofar coated with gold. On Tanios fast days, you use a bent shofar of a ram. The trumpets are in the middle, chatzotzros are in the middle, shofars on the side. Shofar mekatzer v'chatzotzros ma'arichos. The shofar is sounded for a shorter amount of time, and the chatzotzros, the trumpets, extend past the blowing of the shofar. Why? Shemitzas hayom b'chatzotzros. Because on a tainus, interesting enough, on a fast day, the ikar mitzvah is to blow the trumpets, not to blow the shofar. Not to blow the shofar. Shava hayovel Rosh Hashanah, let's kill the brachas. Yovel is like Rosh Hashanah. We're talking about, again, when we say Yovel, we're talking about Yom Kippur of Yovel. The Yom Kippur of Yovel is just like Rosh Hashanah when it comes to Tkios and when it comes to brachos. We'll see exactly what that means. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rosh Hashanah token b'shal scharim u'b'yovlos b'shal ye'elim. Rabbi Yehuda says on Rosh Hashanah, we go ahead and we use a ram's horn, and on Yovel, on Yom Kippur of Yovel, that's when we use the shofar of a wild goat. Okay, so let's analyze all of this. I'm Rabbi Levi. Mitzvah shel Rosh Hashanah b'shem Kippurim b'kfufin b'shal kol Hashana b'pshutin. So also Rabbi Levi says, now introducing another opinion. Rabbi Levi says that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you should use a bent shofar. A bent shofar, literally, not a metaphor, a shofar that is bent. And for the rest of the year, V'shal kol hashana, that was what does it mean for the rest of the year? That means whenever throughout the rest of the year you're using a shofar. When are you using a shofar throughout the rest of the year? When? Fast days. Ta'anios, right? On ta'anios, v'pshutin, you should use a regular shofar. Now I will say, pshutin could mean also of a goat, but pshutin also refers to over here what? The shape. The shape. It need not be bent. It need not be bent. But one second. That contradicts the Mishnah. But yet we learned that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be of a wild goat, and again, doesn't have to be curved. Huda Amar Kiyaitana. You're right, Rabbi Levi disagrees. This is a machlokes, Rabbi saying. This sound Rabbi Huda Omer Rosh Hashanah Yitagim B'Shal Skarim Kifufim Ubi Yovlos B'Shal Ye'elim. Because Rabbi Huda holds that halacha l'maisa Rosh Hashanah, they used to use a shofar of a ram that is bent, and for the rest of the year, or I should say biyovlos, on Yom Kippur, they would go ahead and use a straight shofar. So why don't you just say the halacha of Rabbi Yehuda? Because if it would have said the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, you would have thought that it's true even when? Even by Yovel. Because remember again, what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? Rabbi Yehuda says that halacha l'maisa on Rosh Hashanah, you should use a bent shofar, but on Yom Kippur of Yovel, you could use a straight shofar. See if the Gemara would have said the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, you would have said that means both by Rosh Hashanah as well as by Yom Kippur of Yovel. Therefore, again, Kamash Malon, that perhaps we're just adopting the position of Rabbi Yehuda by Rosh Hashanah, but maybe not by Yom Kippur of Yovel. And the Gemara says, "But my kamiflagi." So we'll say, what exactly is the argument happening over here? So we'll say, what we have over here is a fundamental machlokes about what type of shofar to use on Rosh Hashanah, right? You have, and by extension by Yom Kippur of Yovel, and by extension by Ta'anios as well. So remember again, you have the opinion of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that on Rosh Hashanah you'll use a flat shofar, right? A straight shofar. In other words, the shofar need not be bent, but by Ta'anios, by fast days, the shofar should be bent, right? Then you have the position of Rabbi Levi, and Rabbi Levi says, no, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you should use a bent shofar. By fast days, you could use a flat shofar. Then you have Rabbi Huda, and Rabbi Huda says, on Rosh Hashanah, you should go ahead and use a bent shofar, but in Yom Kippur of Yovel, and Bipashtos, the rest of the fast days as well, you use a flat shofar. What's the machlokes here? What are they arguing about? We'll say, look how fascinating this is. Mar Sovar, listen to this. Mar Sovar, B'Rosh Hashanah Kama Dekayif Inish Daite Tfei Ma'ali. So we'll say, listen to this. The Gemara explains that in reality what's happening over here is as follows. That halacha l'maisa, the shape of the shofar mirrors my disposition, my attitude, and my approach to the day. So the Gemara says like this. One opinion holds that on Rosh Hashanah, both say the goal, kama dekayif inish daite, the more a person bends themselves, which represents what? Humility. Look at Rashi, kama dekayif inish betfilaso, panav kivushin aretz. So both say literally, what it's referring to over here is like a physical posture. The more a person bends themselves over, like hunches themselves over, davens in more of like I don't know if bent over is the right way, but you understand what I mean, right? Kayif means a bent over, a non-erect posture, a bent over posture. That's tvei adif. Mishum v'haya einai v'libay sham v'hilchach b'Rosh Hashanah diletfila ulahaski akedas Yitzchok ba'in kfufin v'yavol shen likro dror ba'in pshutis. Supposed to listen to this. This is incredible. So one opinion says, and this is really the opinion of Rabbi Levi, as well as Rabbi Yehuda, namely that on Rosh Hashanah, the way to come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu is bent. They're both saying, this doesn't just, now here the Gemara is talking about literally like a physical posture, but what it highlights on a more profound level is humility. Remember again, we spoke about this, remember the Gemara said, the Mishnah said, Rosh Hashanah kol ba'i olam ovrim lefanav kibnei maron. Right? Everyone comes before HaKadosh Baruch Hu kibnei maron. Remember again, we had three opinions in the Gemara what kibnei maron meant. The first one was kibnei amarna, like sheep. So Rashi says the imagery of sheep is that for meiser behema, and when the sheep go out of the pen, they go out one by one. highlighting the idea that on Rosh Hashanah we come before HaKadosh Baruch Hu one by one. But on a deeper level, not on a deeper level, on an additional level, the sheep are also humble animals, right? Sheep follow the flock. Sheep, they're always part of the collective. So the idea ultimately on Rosh Hashanah is to approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu with a sense of humility. I come before you, Ribono Shel Olam, and I give myself over to you. So therefore, again, the opinions of Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Yehuda, are going to say, Rosh Hashanah, you use a ben shofar. Watch this, Rabbi say, Yom Kippurim, but on Yom Kippur, now this is not just any Yom Kippur. Which Yom Kippur are we talking about? Which Yom Kippur? Yovel. They both say, what happens on Yovel? What happens on Yovel? This is incredible. What happens on Yovel? Slaves go free, right? Land goes free. Kama deposit inish daite tfei ma'ale. Both say, listen to this. On Yom Kippur, what do you need? On Yom Kippur of Yovel, you want to go free? You want freedom? You need confidence. You need confidence. You need to believe in yourself. Stand straight. Stand straight. Rashi says over here, Kama deposit. Literally, the straighter you are, the better it is. Isn't this incredible? Isn't this incredible? So the opinion, now this is really reflecting over here the position of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Levi is a bit of a hybrid, right? But the idea is the bench shofar represents humility. The straight shofar represents a sense of confidence. So the Gemara says, the other opinion will say, but Rosh Hashanah, kama deposit in ishtaitet fema ale. The other opinion will say no, which is the opinion of the Mishnah. Rosh Hashanah is not bent, Rosh Hashanah is straight. We'll say, because what do you need for Rosh Hashanah? What do you need for Rosh Hashanah? What do you need for Rosh Hashanah? Confidence. Confidence. If you want to be successful in din, you have to be confident. In general, if you want to be successful in anything in life, if you are plagued by self-doubt, you will not be confident. So even though I'm going before din with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I have to be confident that I'm going to be sealed and inscribed and sealed in the Sefer HaChaim. Ubetanios, when it comes to fast days, Rosalie, I have to understand something. When they're speaking about fast days, Bepashtos, what type of fast days are they referring to? Rain. So the other opinion will say that when it comes to rain, halacha l'maisa, that requires a sense of humility. Right? When I'm in need, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not giving me a bracha that I need, and I need it objectively, that requires a sense of humility. So I will say, the Rambam paskins over here, the Shulchan Aruch paskins over here, that for Rosh Hashanah and for Yom Kippur, for Yovel of Yom Kippur, remember again, on a regular year, we also blow the shofar in Yom Kippur, but only the final shofar blast. On Yovel, there were more blasts. So the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam paskin, that like Rabbi Levi, namely that the mitzvah is with kfufin. The mitzvah is with kfufin, right? Interestingly enough, however, but the Tanios, the mitzvah is with pshutin. But what I will tell you something very interesting. What happens if you used a straight horn for Rosh Hashanah or for Yom Kippur? Yotzei. Right, that's why the lashon is mitzvah. Mitzvah means it's ideal. But I will say, but how incredible is this? That there's so much hashkafa embedded in these things as well. Do you come to Rosh Hashanah with a sense of bent over humility, or do you come to Rosh Hashanah with a sense of incredible upright confidence? How do you approach things ultimately again when you don't get what you want in life? Does that humble you, or does that strengthen your resolve? And the answer is, there's not necessarily one correct answer. Sometimes you need to approach things with humility. Sometimes you need to approach things with confidence. But what you begin to see is that humility and confidence are two sides of the same coin. Confidence without humility yields arrogance. Humility without confidence leads ultimately to a lack of sense of self. So you need both of these ideas, humility and confidence. In life, you have to have two shofars, one in each pocket. You have to have your straight shofar of confidence, you have to have your bent shofar of humility, and ultimately you'll be ready for life. So the Gemara goes weiter. Top of Chav Zayin, upiv mitzupazav, and ultimately, now remember the Mishnah said this was the shofar Rosh Hashanah. So the mouthpiece was coated with gold. So the Gemara said, one second. The mouthpiece was coated with gold. We learned that halacha l'maisa, if the mouthpiece was coated with gold, the shofar is pasul. And we'll say, why is it pasul? Because the gold is a chatzitza, right? It essentially serves as an interposition. You have to blow the shofar. You have to blow the shofar, not gold. So the Gemara says, Shalom makom hanachas peiv kasher. But if you go ahead and you coat the shofar with gold, not by the mouthpiece. So I'll say, if you want a gold-plated shofar, That's fine, but you can't do it by the mouthpiece. So how could the Mishnah say that they had? Now, remember, I want to point out over here, where is this Mishnah? What is this Mishnah talking about? Where were these events occurring? This was in the Mikdash, right? Whenever you see this combination of shofar and chatzotzros, that's happening inside of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, "So Amrabai kitna masnisin shelo b'makom hanachas petnan." You're right. We'll say even though the lashon said upiv mitzupa zav, it doesn't literally mean the mouthpiece was coated with gold. What it means is the area by the mouth, but not the mouthpiece itself, right? So the Baal Tokeya has to put his mouth on the shofar. It must mean there was gold somewhere in that area, but not directly on the mouth area. Ushtei chatzotzos minat stadim. So let's listen to this. And then remember again, so now this is Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana, the shofar is in the middle, the chatzotzos are on the side. Utrei kali mi mishtamai. But one second, Abossi, what it sounds like over here is you're blowing everything at once. But can you hear multiple sounds at one time? Could two voices be heard together? Vatanya, we learned, Zachar v'shamar b'dibur echa nemru ma she'ena peh yichol l'daber v'nozu nichol l'shmoa. But so listen to how beautiful this is. Yet we learned two voices can't be heard at the same time. Now where do we know that? Well, so this is so beautiful. Because Chazal teaches, remember again, the two sets of dibros by the mitzvah of Shabbos, two sets of commandments. First time it says Zachar, to remember the Shabbos, and the second time it says Shamar, to guard the Shabbos. Now the Gemara says that Hashem said, now remember, we know that halachically Zachar and Shamar refer to the two different aspects of Shabbos. Zachar refers to the positive mitzvos, Shamar refers to the prohibitions, but yet the amazing part is, the Gemara says, Zachar b'Shamar b'dibur echa nemru. They were set together. Now what's Kadosh Baruch Hu said them simultaneously? Something that a human being cannot do. Human being cannot say two things simultaneously, and something that the human ear is not normally capable of receiving. You can't hear two things simultaneously. So the Gemara says, how could it be if we're blowing the shofar and the chatzotzros at the same time, then at the end of the day, you're not going to hear something. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, you're right. Lekach marich b'shofar. That's why the Mishnah says that on Rosh Hashana, what would they do? They would blow everything together, but they would prolong the blowing of the shofar. Meaning what? So the end of the shofar blowing was done without the chatzotzos, without the trumpets, so you just heard the shofar by itself. The memra. Whoa, one second. So you're telling me then, the chishama sof tekiya, below tchilas tekiya yatsa. So you're telling me then that what? That if you only hear the end of the tekiya, without the beginning, because what's happening over here, right? When you start, what are you blowing? What's being blown? Everything. And then again, for 5 seconds of blowing the chatzotzros, you stop the chatzotzros, and for another 3 seconds, the shofar continues on. So in essence, what you're really hearing is the end of the tekiah, the end of the shofar blast, not the beginning. Because the beginning, remember again, the beginning is wrapped up together with the trumpets. So bepashtos, it sounds like even if you only hear the end of a blast, you're yotzei. Is that true? Vatanya, we learned, let me read that again. So the Gemara says, the Memra, the chishama sof tekiya below tchilas tekiya yatsa. So that must mean you're saying that if you only hear the end of the tekiya, but you didn't hear the beginning of the tekiya, that you're yotzei. Or therefore, again, I'll say, if that's true, in other words, listen to this. If you could be yotzei with an end of a tekiya, the Gemara assumes, therefore, it goes without saying, umamela, tchilas tekiya below sof tekiya yatsa. Then certainly, if you only heard the beginning of a tekiya, without the end of the tekiya, that you should also be yotzi. In other words, that it sounds like from here, you can be yotzi even with what, Rabbi? Say even with what? Partial tkiyas. So watch this. The Gemara says, is that true? Tashma, taka berishona, umashach b'shniya kishtayim. So also listen to this case. We're going to get into the halachos of tekiya shofar. But remember again, right? Really, the halach is you have to blow a tekiya, a shivarim, and a tekiya. So now listen to this, and you blow that 3 times. Tashat, tashat, tashat. Tekiya, shvarim, tekiya, shvarim, tekiya. Good. So I'll say, watch this case. So I blow a tekiya, I blow a shvarim. So now I figure, you know what, I'm going to chaperayim, and I'm going to blow a double long tekiya, right? And that way, again, my double long tekiya will, so to speak, fulfill 2 pieces at once. It'll take care of the last tekiya of the first 3 sounds, and what? The last tekiya of the first 3, and the first tekiya of the second 3. of the second three. So the Gemara says, in biyada ala achas. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. All you have, what do you have? What do you have? One tekiah. A long tekiah, but one tekiah. Amai, but why is that? Tisalik le betarti. I don't understand. Why can't that count as? In other words, what the Gemara is suggesting about say is as follows. If partial tekiyahs work, then why shouldn't a double long tekiah work and satisfy two? To which the Gemara says, no, because psuke tekiyah semehadadi lo paskinan. Because it was like, even if you want to entertain the possibility that a partial tekiah could work, at the end of the day, one long sound is one long sound. The halacha doesn't have the ability to go ahead and break one long sound into multiple. They're both saying no different that if you happen to Kanai be blessed with serious lungs, and you're able to blow a tekiah, a shvam, and a tekiah all in one breath, right? No one is going to suggest that your yahrzeit 3 sounds with that. Because the halacha could do a lot of things. But what the halacha can't do is take one long sound and break it up into multiple sounds. So Tashma, let's analyze. Hatokeh l'socha bar. Boss disagree. We're going to do all of these cases that are so exciting. Hatokeh l'socha bar l'socha dus l'socha pitam. Somebody's blowing shofar in a pit, or in a cistern, or into a barrel. What's the halacha, Bosai? Im kol shofar shama yatsa. If halacha l'maisa you hear kol shofar, you're yotzei. Right? In other words, we'll say, v'im kol avara shama lo yatsa. So of course the challenge in all of these areas are you hearing the shofar or are you hearing the echo? Again, we'll do this sugya. If you hear the shofar, you're yotzei. If you hear the echo, you're not yotzei. So the Gemara says, but why? Amai, leipuk betchilas tekiah mikamei de la'arvev kala. This is fascinating. The Gemara says, there has to be a piece of the kol that is sounded before the echo starts. So if you hold that aloha l'maisa, you can be yotzei with a partial blast. Why not go ahead and be yotzei with the beginning of the kol, quote unquote, before the echo sets in? So the Gemara says, you're right. Ela tarti kale mechad gavra lo mishtamai. Mitrei gavri mishtamai. To which the Gemara says, in reality, Rabosai, when we say that two kolos, right, two sounds or two words cannot be heard at once, that's when they're coming from the same person. But when you have multiple sounds coming from multiple people, as is the case over here, some blowing shofros, some blowing chatzotzros, different people blowing different things, you can hear those things simultaneously. So when you are yotzei the mitzvah of shofar, interestingly enough, you're not yotzei with a partial kol, but rather, again, you are yotzei with the kol in its entirety. So the Gemara says, really? Is that true? That you could hear two things from two independent people simultaneously? Vatanya, we learned, b'torah echad kori ve'echad metargim. When it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, one person could read and one person could translate. O bilvad shelo yehu, they changed it over here. Bilvad shelo yehu echad korei ushnayim metargamin. But you can't have one person reading and two people translating. So the Gemara says, so what do you see from here? Because if two people are translating, you won't be able to understand what's going on. Now this is two people saying two different things, and yet again we're saying you can't hear them. Halodamya elala seifa. No. But look at the seifa. What did the seifa say? Bahalalu b'megillah afilu asara korin. But so when it comes to halal and Megillah, even if 10 people are reading, ultimately you can hear what everyone's saying. Alma, why is that? Kevan dechaviv yohiv daite. Both say this is so profound. See, normally, when multiple people are talking or singing or translating, you can't hear multiple people at once. Unless, of course, what? You want to hear them. If something is important to you, you hear it. Something is important to hear, which, by the way, is such a profound yesod in life. Right? Sometimes people talk to us, and then we say, I don't remember you said that. Deep down, it's probably because it wasn't important. This is why this causes, on a serious note, so many shalom bias problems, where a spouse says something, the other spouse does. I'm not saying who's who, but right, the other spouse doesn't remember what they said, and the spouse who is talking becomes so irate, and the other spouse who was listening says, "What did I?" I'm projecting a little bit over here, right? The other spouse says, "Come on, I missed it." And the truth is, the spouse who's angry is actually kind of right. Because at the end of the day, if it was important enough for, not me, but someone else to hear what the other talking spouse was saying, that spouse would have been attentive. The fact that it was missed, and that's the Gemara saying, when something's important, you listen. So Hallel is exciting. So there could be 10 people saying Hallel, I hear it. Everyone hears it. Something that's not as important, people don't hear it. Shabbos say such an incredible yesod. When you put your mind to something and something is important, you get it done. Often in life, when things don't get done, so we like to say, I ran out of time, or this, that. At the end of the day, when things don't get done, often, not always, but often it just means it wasn't a priority. If it was a priority, it gets done, right? No one forgets to put on their pants because that's a priority, right? You can't walk out, right? It never, no such thing like that ever happens. If it's a priority, it gets done. When it doesn't get done, a person has to question what level of priority that is. You hear the things you want to hear in life. The things that are less important or less chaviv, ultimately, again, a person could slip by. Hachanami, kevan de chaviv, yoiv daite v'shama. Rabbi says, so too by shofar. The Gemara says something amazing. So too by shofar, halacha l'maisa, people want to hear shofar. So even though, again, there's chatzotzros blowing as well, people still hear the shofar. Ela lama marech. So we'll say, so what comes out of here is as follows. It turns out that halacha l'maisa, it says, as we initially thought, which is that what? The shofar and the trumpets are being blown at the same time. I betray koli lo mishtama. You can't hear two things simultaneously. Yes, you can. When it's chaviv. When it's something important to you, something near and dear to you, you hear it even at the same time. If that's the case, elalama marich b'shofar. So if that's the case, that you hear everything, why does the Mishnah say that they blow the shofar longer than the chatzotzros? Leida shemitzas hayom b'shofar. To remind everyone that although we're blowing both trumpets and shofar, the mitzvah of the day is with shofar and not with chatzotzros. Beautiful. We'll say first white line chapsayin amdalef. Ubetaniyos b'shal schram kifufim upiv mitzupa kesef. And on fast days we use a ram's horn that is bent, and the mouthpiece is coated with silver. Why is it that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is coated with gold, and the shofar of fast days is silver? So one possibility I will say is because anytime you're gathering the people for prayer, as happens on a fast day, we use silver. V'haraya, when Moshe Rabbeinu, Chash Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu to make for himself 2 silver trumpets, and those are the trumpets through which he was able to gather the people. So silver is used for any gathering. And the other possibility is HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes it easy on the finances of Klal Yisrael. That to go ahead and make this shofar gold as well, or when we say gold, it's not all gold, but there's gold on it, costs more money. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is careful how he manages our resources. If that's the case, if that's the case, then why not make the shofar of Rosh Hashanah also of gold? Of silver. Yet the Mishnah says that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is made of gold. So you understand when I say made of gold, I don't mean that literally. It means there's some gold plating on it. Kavod Yom Tiv Adif. What is beautiful? You're right. But since Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Tiv, part of the way we demonstrate our kavod for the Yom Tiv is by putting some gold plating on the shofar. So quite beautiful. So the Gemara says, Rav Papa bar Shmuel savar leme'abed uvda kimas nisin. So Rav Papa bar Shmuel wanted to institute this practice even outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Bechatzos v'shofar. So the Gemara says, Amrli Rava lo amru ela b'mikdash. Rava said, no. This practice of blowing both the shofar and the chatzotzros on Rosh Hashanah, right, is only a din in the Beis HaMikdash, not to be replicated outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Tanya Nami, that supports this. When do you have this practice of blowing both chatzotzros as well as shofar? The Mikdash. Aval bigvulin makom sheish chatzotzros in shofar, makom sheish shofar in chatzotzros. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, I will say, if you're blowing the trumpets, you don't blow the shofar. Remember again, when do you blow the trumpets? Fast days. So when there's fast days, there's trumpets, no shofar. Rosh Hashanah, there's shofar, no trumpets. V'chein hinig Rabbi Chalafta b'tzipori. Rabbi Chanina ben Trajon b'sichni. This is how Rabbi Chalafta conducted himself in Tzipori. Rabbi Chanina ben Trajon in Sichni. Ukeshabad davra Yitzchok Chachamim amru lo hayu noagin kein ella b'sha'ari Mizrach or b'harabayis bilvad. And again, the Chachamim confirmed this, and they said that halacha l'maisa. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. V'chein hinhig means that ultimately, again, these Rabbanim that we just mentioned conducted themselves like the Mishnah. Namely, they blew both shofar and chatzotzros, unlike what we said before. And when the Chachamim came along, they confirmed that which we said before. Namely, the shofar chatzotzros combination was only done b'makom hamikdash, specifically b'sharei mizrach, on the eastern gates, and the harabayis. So therefore the conclusion of the Gemara is that at the end of the day we only blow the chatzotzros shofar combination in the Beis Hamikdash itself or on the harabayis itself, but anywhere else, if you're blowing the shofar Hashan, no chatzotzros, you're blowing the chatzotzros fast day, no shofar. Amar Rav Avitim Rabbi Yosef Hershel Mikra Dichsiv Bechatzosros v'kol shofar hariu lifnei HaMelech Hashem. But say, how do you know that this practice only takes place in the Beis Hamikdash? Watch this, because the pasuk says bechatzosros with the trumpets, ubekol shofar, the sounding of the shofar, hariu lifnei Hashem. Blow it, right, or sound it before Hashem. Lifnei HaMelech Hashem. What do we darshan? Lifnei HaMelech Hashem u'deba'inu an chatzosros v'kol shofar. Aval ba'amolo. It's only when you are before Hashem, i.e. in the Mikdash, that you have an obligation of both chatzotzros and shofar. But outside of the mikdash, it is going to be an either or. Beautiful. Shavay Yovel Shana Tequila Brachas. So remember again, the Mishnah said that Yovel is just like Rosh Hashanah for tekios and brachos. The Gemara says, what does that mean? Amar Rabbi Silber Yitzchok. Keman masnina in ze hayom techilas maasecha zikran yom rishon. I will say in Rosh Hashanah davening we say ze hayom techilas maasecha, which means today is the first day of creation. So Kiman, whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar B'Tishrei Nivra Olam, ultimately again reflects the view of Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that the world was created in Tishrei. Also, we just had this machlokes. Masir Ravino, Shavi Yola Shal Tkila Brachas, Va'ika Zayam Tchilas Ma'asech, Zikran Yom Arishon, the Rosh Hashanah Isab Yovalesa. Here's the problem. So Avina brings up, but yet the Mishnah says, so in Rosh Hashanah, we make a declaration, today is the first day of your creation. Like Rabbi Elazar, that the world was created in Tishrei. Here's the problem. What did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah said that the tefillos of Yovel are like Rosh Hashanah. We'll say, when we say Yovel, what are we referring to in Yovel? Which part of Yovel? Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is already 10 days in. Does that, so you can't say, Zeh hayom techilas ma'asecha, today is the first day of creation on Yom Kippur of Yovel. You're already 10 days into the year. To which the Gemara says, Ki katani ashar, you're right. What it means is, the rest of Rosh Hashanah davening that is non-creation day specific. Right? So the rest of Rosh Hashanah, right, there are many themes expressed in Rosh Hashanah. So obviously, phrases like that, Zeh hayom techilas ma'asecha, today is the first day of creation, phrases like that do not carry over to Yovel. But the other parts of Rosh Hashanah davening will. So the Rav Shishbei Rav Idi Masni Hachi Amar Shlomo Yitzchok Hadisnan Shava Yovel Rosh Hashanah L'Tkila Brachas. When we say that Yovel is like Rosh Hashanah for shofar and for brachas, Kiman, whose opinion does that reflect? Delo Rabbi Eliezer. So we'll say an alternate version of this discussion. It must not reflect the view of Rabbi Eliezer. Why? Di Rabbi Eliezer Kevan Damar B'Tishrei Nivra Olam Ha'ika Zayam Tchilas Ma'asecha. Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, he holds that Rosh Hashanah is the first day of creation, and as such, that sentiment is found in davening of Rosh Hashanah, and it would not make sense to carry that over to Yovel. To which the Gemara says, you're right, the Rosh Hashanah is to Yovelesa, Kikatani Asha'ara. What it means is that, no. It means that any part of Rosh Hashanah davening that is creation day specific, that stays with Rosh Hashanah. But the rest of Rosh Hashanah davening that has other elements in it, Malchias, Zichronos, Shofros, ultimately, again, that carries over to Yom Kippur of Yovel as well. Beautiful. We'll say Hilchah Shofar Mishnah. Shofar shenistak v'dibko. We'll listen to this. You have a shofar that's split. Now, we'll say, when the Gemara, we're going to see from the Gemara that when we're talking about shofar splitting, often we're talking about a thing that splits across its length, across the length. Right? Shofar shenistak, so the shofar split across its length, v'dibko, and you glued it back together. Puzzle. Ultimately, the shofar is puzzle. Rabbi said, now why is it puzzle? Rashi says over here, the puzzle, to havile kishnei shofros. Because now it's like two shofros. Right? It's like two shofars. Now that's why I mentioned before, the shofar is splitting down along the length. Right? Because now you have two pieces, two independent pieces, both of which, when you put them back together, that is not one glued shofar, that's like two shofars coming together. Dibek shivei shofar. Similarly, again, I will say, if you go ahead and you have a bunch of broken shofars, and you take the pieces, and you fashion together a shofar, puzzle. Ultimately, such a shofar is puzzle. The same idea, because that is like having two different shofars. Amud Beis, Nikav v'sasmo, an interesting case. What happens if you have a hole? You get a hole in your shofar, v'sasmo, and you plug the hole of the shofar. So we'll say, if the hole would have prevented you from blowing a coal, right? If the hole would have prevented you from producing sound with the shofar, so that means essentially the shofar wasn't valid. Now when you plug it up, it's as if there's a new substance over here. It's like two shofros. So if, again, with the hole you could not blow the shofar, then even if you plug it back up, the shofar is still going to be pasul. Vim lav, but if you had a hole in the shofar, but the shofar was still usable, then the plugging up of the hole is halachically inconsequential. Also, we just quoted this piece. If a person blows a shofar into a pit, or into a cistern, into a barrel, im kol shofar shama yatsa, if he heard the sound of the shofar, he's yotzei. Ve'im kol avara shama lo yatsa. But if you didn't hear the shofar, but instead you heard an echo, you're not yotzei. Bless you. V'chein. So we'll say similarly, this idea. Now, it's not really similar. We're going to see, this is really a different case. So we'll say, right? So, v'chein. Mishaya over achori beis hakneses. O shahaya beiso samach lebeis hakneses. We'll say similarly, let's say again on Rosh Hashana. I'm walking by the shul. Or, I live right next door to the shul. So what happens? V'shama kol shofar. I hear them blowing shofar. Now both say, the Mishnah says v'chein, and it makes it sound like it's similar to the previous case. The previous case of the bar, the dus, the pitam is a case of echo. This is not a case of echo. This is a case of what we'll call incidental sound. In other words, I'm walking by the shul and I hear shofar. I live next door and I hear shofar. Or for that matter, or Megillah. So what's talacha? Im kiben libo yatsa, ve'im lav lo yatsa. If you have kavanah to be yotzei with the mitzvah of shofar, you're yotzei. Same idea, you have kavanah to be yotzei with Megillah, you're yotzei. Ve'im lo kiben, ve'im lav lo yatsa. But if you don't have kavanah, you're not yotzei. I will say such a profound yisod, right? Kavanah makes all the difference. Afa pisha zeh shama v'zeh shama. Even though, again, in both cases, you heard the shofar, you heard the Megillah, zeh kivin libo v'zeh lo kivin libo. So also here the Mishnah is introducing us to something profound, which is merely hearing the kol shofar, or merely hearing the Megillah is not enough. One requires kavanah, specific intent to be yotzei. Again, we'll develop that theme a bit more. Tan Rabbanon, aruch v'katra kasher. So let's listen to this. Let's say you had a very long shofar, and you decided to cut off part of it, right? You had one of those long, Sfardish shofros, and you decided to lop off part of it. That's fine. Kasher. Gardo ve'midu agildo kasher. But let's say, now listen to this case, right? A shofar has a thickness to it. Let's say gardo literally means you scraped. Let's say you scraped away, you chipped away at the shofar to the point that you left it it's a very, very thin layer, a very thin shofar. Ve'midu agildo kasher. Still kasher. Suppose puzzle. If you went ahead and you put gold by the mouthpiece, we said this before, it's going to be puzzle, right? Because most of that's a chatzitza. But if you put gold on the shofar somewhere else, not by the mouthpiece, it's going to be kosher. Listen to this case. If you coated the interior of the shofar with gold, it's going to be puzzle. Why is that? Because halacha, you've altered the sound. So also we'll say, in that case, it's viewed as if the interior gold is producing the sound, not the shofar. It's not really right. It's not really alter the sound. It's that now it's viewed that the gold is producing the sound. Mi bachutz, however, if you put gold on the shofar on the outside, im nishtane kolo mikamo shaya pasol. If the exterior gold changes the sound, then it's pasul. Ve'im lav kasher. But if not, ultimately, again, it's going to be kosher. Also, I was thinking about this. It was the second time we're mentioning this now, about putting gold on the shofar. So it's interesting because by other mitzvahs, there's a concept ultimately of hidur mitzvah, beautifying it. I think I've ever seen a shofar with gold adornment, right? Gold, I've never seen it. Gold something, which I think goes back to what we were saying before, that we paskin that halacha l'maaseh, the ideal by Rosh Hashana is the bent shofar, right? That's the ideal. And therefore halacha l'maaseh, the humility is the ideal when it comes to shofar, and therefore, again, you're not going to find gold in general on the shofar, because the idea is kafaf. Then the Gemara goes right there. Listen to this. Nike v'sasar. Well, it's an interesting case. You get a hole in your shofar. Now you plug up the hole. Imma ake v'satkiya pasol ve'im lav kasher. So I'll say this is interesting. So we'll define this a bit more, but what it sounds like is as follows. If the plugging up of the hole somehow impacts the tikiyah, it's going to be pasol. But if not, it's going to be kosher. Again, we'll develop that case. Nasan shofar b'soch shofar. Listen to this. Let's say you put one shofar inside of another shofar. Im kol pnimi shama yasa. If you're hearing the call of the interior shofar, you're yotzei. Vim kol chitzon shama lo yatsa. But if it's the exterior shofar, then you're not yotzei. Okay? Tan Rabbanan. So we'll say, let's analyze all of these cases. Gardu b'mifnim b'machutz kasher. We'll say, scraping your shofar. So let's say you want a very thin, for whatever the reason, right? You're scraping the shofar. So now again, is a very thin layer of shofar. Kasher. Ultimately, again, we'll say what it sounds like the Gemara is saying is what? There is no requisite thickness of the shofar. No requisite thickness. If you put one shofar in first wide line instead of another shofar, if you heard the sound of the interior shofar yatsa, but if you heard the exterior sound, you'll say to yourself, how do you know? It's very simple. How do you know? You blow each of them independently, and then when you blow them together, you hear which sound is it producing. So hafcho, let's listen to this case. Hafcho b'takabo. If you turn your shofar upside down and you blow it, lo yatsa, you're not yotzei. Now what does that mean? Amara papa, now that's a strange case. Why? You have to have one big mouth, right, to blow the shofar from the other side. So says the Gemara, Amara papa, no. Lo tema da havche kikisuna. It doesn't mean like somebody who turns their shirt upside down. Right? That's not, if you look at Rashi says over Havcha Kigisuna Kafichas Chaluk Lasos Pnimi Chitza. Now what it means is, it doesn't mean like to turn your shirt inside out, but rather what does it mean? Elo Shehirchives HaKatzar VeKatzar HaRachav. Let's say you did the following. Let's say with heat, you expanded the mouthpiece and you contracted the upper wider part. So essentially, you just through heat, you manipulated the shofar and you made again the mouthpiece the upper part through which the sound exits, and the upper part through which the sound exits, you made into the mouthpiece. So you just manipulated your shofar. What's the halacha? It's possible. It doesn't work. So the Gemara says, why is that? My time masna va'avarta. Both say it's actually quite beautiful. The pasuk says va'avarta shofar trua. Literally, now both say we translate va'avarta means you will blow, but va'avarta the Gemara darshans derech ha'avarasa ba'inon. You have to blow the shofar the way the ram carries it on its body. Both say, remember again, what we call the mouthpiece is actually where the shofar is attached via a bone to the head of the ram. So the shofar has to be blown the way the ram carries it. So the ram carries it with the narrow part attached to its body, the upper part extending up. That's how it has to be blown as well. Incredible. Dibeg shivei shofros. We'll say we have 2 more minutes. So dibeg shivei shofros. If you went ahead and you glued together broken pieces of shofar, right? Broken pieces of shofar. So what's the halacha? Dibek shivei shofros. Pasal. It's pasal. Tan Rabbanan. Hosif alav kolshu. Beba mina be shlo mina pasal. Both say similarly. If you added something onto the shofar, right? If you added something on, literally again, hosif alav, whether it's part of the original min, not part of the original min, the shofar is pasal. So both say b'pashtos. That sounds, what is that based on? One shofar and not multiple shofros. Nike v'sasin. Now here we go. What happens if the shofar developed a hole and you plug the hole? Bein b'mino, bein shelo b'mino pasol. Whether you plug the hole with the same min, right, the same type of shofar, or let's say from the same ram, you add a piece of the shofar. For example, I will say, we just learned before that if you have a very long shofar, what can you do? You can lop off a piece of it. So now let's say I had a long shofar, I lopped off a piece of it. Now my remaining shofar, I get a hole. So great, now I have spare shofar parts, right? So what do I want to plug the hole with? With a piece from that same shofar. That's called mino, right? Or shaloba mino. Or I plug it with something else. Either way, it's going to be pasul. Rabbi Nassan says no. B'mino kasher. If you could plug the shofar with the same min, ultimately that's going to be kasher. Now, I will say the truth is, in reality, it doesn't even have to come from the same shofar. What it means is, if you could plug a shofar with shofar material, Rabbi Nassan is going to say that's kasher. That's called mino. Shaloba mino, pasul. But to plug a shofar, ultimately again, shaloba mino, that is going to be pasul. So the Gemara says, the mino kasher, Rabbi Yochanan, v'hushin ishtaya rubo. Ultimately, I will say, but when we say that you plug it with the same min, with the same shofar material, that is going to be kosher, that's only assuming that the majority of the shofar is still intact. Michlal de shaloba mino, afa pishin ishtaya ruba pasal. ultimately we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up Memory of Hashem with Rabbi Nasson's position. Memory of Hashem on Shabbos. We'll say Shkoyach, a good chodesh. Just a reminder also, the Mishnah Yomi program, Memory of Hashem, begins today. If you want, the small Mishnahs are not yet ready, but there are copies of the Mishnahs over here. And Memory of Hashem, the shir will be posted on the podcast this morning. Get started, a beautiful limud. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check the WhatsApp. I posted it on the WhatsApp chat for the Daf Yomi.